Baruch Hashem. Today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Ayin Dalet. Yevamos 74 says the Gemara. The Gemara is discussing an Arel. Is a chapter. It's called Arel and Arel, the uncircumcised one. Are they allowed to partake of the Meiser Sheni? What's the Meiser Sheni? We know that there are three terms that are referred to with the word Meiser in the Torah. There is Meiser Rishon. That's the tithe that is given to the Levites. That they give your 10% of your crops after you give the truma, you give that to the Levites. And there's Meiser Sheni, which is also called Meiser Dagan, and that is that after you give the tithe to the Levites in the first, second, and fourth and fifth years of the 7-year sabbatical cycle, you have to separate a second tithe and bring those crops to Yerushalayim to eat. And then there is Meiser Behema, which is that the 10th animal of every animal that's born that year, you bring through your crops. The 10th one you mark with a red mark, and you say, this is to Hashem. The Meiser Behema goes to Hashem. So now the Gemara says, Tashma, we're discussing the question of is an Arel, an uncircumcised person, allowed to partake in the Meiser Sheni? Says the Gemara, Tashma, let's say after you give this person the circumcision, then there were remaining tzitzin. He's uncircumcised. But bottom line is, we're talking about a person who's not really circumcised. He's an Arel. This person cannot eat. Lo b'truma, they can't eat from truma. Lo b'pesach, they can't eat from the korban pesach. Korban pesach is a type of korban. Lo b'kachim, they can't eat from the sacred food that was sacrificial offerings. V'lo b'meiser, and they also cannot partake of the meiser. So it says the Gemara, isn't this a proof? My love, Meiser Dagan. Isn't this a proof that this is referring to what we call Meiser Sheni? The Gemara also calls Meiser Dagan, Meiser of grain. And doesn't this prove that an Arel cannot partake in the Meiser Sheni? The Gemara says, no, Meiser Behema. No, it's not referring to Meiser Dagan. It's referring to the 10th animal. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Meiser Behema, Hainu Kachim. Meiser Behema is indeed Kachim. It's the same exact sacrificial food as Kachim. It's sacrificial food. By the way, there is a discussion elsewhere in the Gemara. I don't remember exactly where. The Gemara talks about maybe Meiser Behema is not even considered like a complete korban, that it's different than all the other korbanos. So the Gemara could have given that answer, but the Gemara doesn't give that answer. So the Gemara says, it can't be referring to Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema is Kachim. The Gemara says, but according to your logic, Milo Tanan. Afterwards, we'll call Zev. We'll ask him what he says about Meiser Behema or Chiddush. So the Gemara says, "Tamech Milo Tanan." Didn't we learn Pesach v'Katani Kachim? It says Pesach, which is a type of korban. It also says Kachim. So it says both. Bishlam Pesach v'Kachim. Truly, I understand why it says Pesach and Kachim. Why it needs to say korban Pesach and Kachim. The Tani Pesach, because if it just listed the Pesach, I would say Mishum Da'arel Pesach Sivi. I might have thought that the only prohibition of an Arel is to eat the korban Pesach, because that's where it's written. About Kachim, Imaloba might have thought by Kachim that the Arel could partake in the Kachim. Vitana Kachim, and if we just had the case of Kachim, Havamina my Kachim Pesach, I might have said that the Kachim refers only to Pesach. Or Meiser Behema Lamali, but it wouldn't have needed to repeat the case of the Meiser Behema. So it must be that the Bryce is referring to. Gemara says that what's the Bryce referring to? It's referring to Meiser Rishon. So that not referring to Meiser Sheni, but it's referring to Meiser Rishon. The Rabbi Meir here, and it goes according to the position of Rabbi Meir, who's at the position Meiser Rishon Atzer Azarim. So there's a dispute elsewhere in Yevamos as well, and also appears in Ksubos, who eats the Meiser Rishon? And Rabbi Meir is on the position that the Meiser Rishon cannot be eaten by a Zar. A Zar is a non, in this case, it means a non-Kohen and also a non-Levite. So therefore, that's what it refers to. It doesn't refer to the person, the Meiser Sheni. So we're still left with the question, can the person who is uncircumcised eat from the secondary tithe in Jerusalem? So the Gemara says, from the Meiser Sheni in Jerusalem. So the Gemara says, let's try and solve this question from here. Tashma miditani Rabbi Chia barav midifti. From the following brayse says, Arol Asher b'shtei Meisers. Remember, we said that there are three terms that call Meiser. Meiser can refer to Meiser Behema, Meiser Sheni, or Meiser Rishon. So we want to know about the Meiser Sheni, but in this case, it says that an Arol cannot eat from the two Meisers. Why wouldn't he identify which two. We don't know, but the Brisa didn't do it. So we want to say what's it referring to? My love isn't one of them. Echad Meiser Dagam, Echad Meiser Behema. And doesn't that prove that the Aral cannot partake in the Meiser Sheni? The Gemara says, no. What are we referring to? It doesn't refer to the Meiser Sheni, it refers to the Meiser Rishon, and it follows the position of Rabbi Meir. It follows the position of Rabbi Meir, who says that the Zar cannot eat from the Meiser Sheni and all from the Meiser Rishon, and neither can an Aral. So now we have another type of Brisa. Again, we're still trying to answer the question: can an uncircumcised person eat from the Meiser Sheni? Gemara lists several overlapping categories. An onain, that's a mourner. Also, b'meiser, he cannot partake of the Meiser Sheni. Umutar b'truma, the onain can eat from the truma. Ubapara, what does that mean? He can partake in the mitzvah of preparing the red heifer. I don't know if it's a mitzvah, but he can partake in preparing of the red heifer. Ubameiser, and the onain. I skipped the line. Utful yom, what's a tful yom? A tful yom is a person who immersed in the mikveh that day. He has to wait for nightfall to eat from the truma. So the tful yom, the person who immersed that day, aser b'truma. He can't eat the truma umutar b'para, but he can partake in the para aduma uba meiser, and he can partake in the meiser sheni. This became, by the way, a source of tremendous controversy. That the rabbi said that the person who had to wait for nightfall, the tful yom, but during the day, he was still allowed to prepare the para aduma. The Tzdukim didn't agree with that. So the rabbis, to prove that the Tzdukim were wrong, they separated the person who was going to be involved in this for a week, and then they intentionally made him tamei and then immersed him in the mikvah just to show that the Tvul Yom can partake in the mitzvah of the para aduma, just to show that the Tzdukim were wrong. Yeah. That's the first staff in Maseches Yoma. We did that already. Mechusar Kippurim is a person who needs to bring a korban in order to be purified. Meaning to say, the Mechusar Kippurim, it's not enough that they went to the mikvah, they also have to bring a korban in order to eat from the kachim. There are four categories of people who are Mechusar Kippurim. They are the Zava, these are men or women who have tumah that comes out of their body, the Yoledes, the woman who gives birth, and the Metzora, the leper. So the Mechusar Kippurim is also a par. They cannot partake in the para duma, umutur betruma ub'meiser, and they're allowed to eat from the truma and the meiser. Mar says, Vim Isa, and if it's the case that an Aral will be mutter, would be allowed to partake in the Meiser Sheni, you could have said, Nisne Aral Asr B'Truma. You could have listed another example. You could have said the Aral was prohibited to eat from the Truma, Umutter B'Para B'Meiser Sheni, but they are allowed to eat they are allowed to engage in the Para Duma and eat from the Meiser Sheni. So Mar says, Haitana the Rabbi Akiva. Now this source, the reason why it doesn't list the Aral, because according to this source, the Aral really can eat from the Meiser Sheni, but it's not the majority opinion. It's just the minority opinion of the Brisa of Rabbi Akiva, the Merabi Leila Aral Katame, who says that the Aral is like a Tame person, and therefore the Aral cannot partake in the Para Duma or eat from the Meiser Sheni. The Danya Rabbi Akiva Omer Ish Ish. It says in the pasuk Ish Ish LeRabos Es Aral. It means to say that an Aral is also Tame. Uman Tana de Rabbi Akiva, and who argues with this position of Rabbi Akiva? That's the Tana of the Brisa of Rabbi Yossi Abavli. The Tanya Sreifas Onain. Let's say an Onain, a mourner, wants to burn the red heifer, Mechusar Kippurim, and somebody who's Mechusar Kippurim wants to partake in the mitzvah of the red heifer, Kisher, it's kosher. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Abavli Omer Onain Kisher Mechusar Kippurim Psua. So Rabbi Yossi Abavli says that the Onain is Kisher, but the Mechusar Kippurim is Psua. But we see from here that the Tana Kama of Rabbi Yossi Abavli says the Mechusar Kippurim is kosher in the Para Aduma, and if he's saying the Mechusar Kippurim is kosher in the Para Aduma, for sure he's going to be in the position that the Aral is kosher he argues with him by Aral, because that's a tremendous chiddush that the Mechusar Kippurim can partake in the Para Aduma. So the Gemara says, V'af Rabbi Yitzchak Savar Aral also Meiser. So we've seen in the Brisa of Rabbi Akiva says that an Aral is prohibited to partake in the Meiser Sheni. Also Rabbi Yitzchak says that an Aral cannot partake in the Meiser Sheni. How do we know that the Aral is prohibited in the Meiser Sheni? Because Nemar Mimenu b'Meiser, it says the word Mimenu by the Meiser Sheni. V'Nemar Mimenu b'Pesach, and it says Mimenu by Karban Pesach. So we make a Gzeira Shava. Ma Mimenu ha'emor b'Pesach Aral, just like when it says Al Tachu Mimenu Na, we're referring to an Aral cannot eat from the Karban Pesach when he's an Aral. So too, when the word Mimenu appears on Meiser Sheni, and Aral cannot partake in the Meiser Sheni. And the Gemara says, in order to make a Gzeira Shava, it needs to be mufni. What does mufni mean? That the word which you're using to compare it to Gzeira Shava means we could take one word from one context, another word from another, and we can say that they are the same law, but it needs to be mufni. What's mufni? Mufni means that one of the words is not needed where it is, and it can be used, therefore, to teach us this lesson by comparing it. The law mufni, because if it wouldn't be free, equal mifrach, you could challenge it by saying, Mala Pesach shekein chayavin alav mishum pigol no servatame. Pesach has these unique stringencies that you're liable for it if you are pigol, if it's improper intention, no if it's expired, or tameh, if you eat it while you are tameh. Gemara says, yes, the word, there is an extra mimenu that's left around for us to make this comparison. And my mufne, how is it extra? So it's a klasa mimenu ksivi Pesach. The word mimenu from it appears 3 times by the Pesach. One is l'gufe, meaning to teach us what actually it is stating in the verse, that you can't eat from the Pesach unless it's roasted, but the matzah and the maror don't need to be roasted. One is to compare it to Arla. And one is to tell us that you don't get lashes if you eat it that way because it's a positive commandment as well. So I did the no sir, nami mimenu, because he wrote no sir by Yisrofu, therefore it says mimenu in a positive format. And the Gemara so and there's another position that says that the word no sir is to tell us that you can't burn it on the first day of Pesach if it's expired after the mat, but you have to wait till the second day. I did ksiv aboker ksiv nami menu. So he would say that because it says aboker, you have to ksiv mimenu. But anyway, the Gemara says so it is extra. And tlas mimenu ksiva b'maiser. And why does it say the word mimenu 3 times by maiser sheni? Chal gufe. One is to tell us that with gufe to tell us the law itself by the maiser sheni. What is the law itself? That an onain is not allowed to eat from the maiser sheni. V'chad with the Rabbi Avo. One is to teach us the law of Rabbi Avo. What is the law of Rabbi Avo? We did this earlier. And Rashi tells us that you can burn, that if the maiser sheni became tameh and it was oil, you could use it as fuel. Meaning to say you're not allowed to use it as fuel. That by truma you could use it as fuel, but not maiser sheni. And the third position is the third position is chadla de Reish Lakish. Like Reish Lakish said, that what do you use it for? The Amar Reish Lakish, Amar Rabbi Simai, Minayla Meiser Sheni, Shenutma Shemutar Lasocho. That you could take this Meiser Sheni oil, even though the Torah says you have to take it up to Jerusalem to eat or to drink, that you're allowed to smear it on your body. And why are you allowed to use the Meiser Sheni oil to use it as an anointing? Because it says about the Meiser Sheni, I didn't give it to be used for a dead body. I didn't use it for the dead body, but I can use it for a living person in a manner similar to a dead body. And what's something that you could use in the same manner for both the living and the dead? You can't feed a dead person, but you could anoint the person with oil. So therefore, you're not allowed to use your Meiser Sheni oil to smear it on a dead body, but you can use it to smear it on your own body. So the Gemara says, but wait, how do we know that that's what it's referring to? Maybe it means that you can't use the Meiser Sheni money to buy shrouds or a coffin for the dead. Mimenu means migufo, mimenu means that you're using it itself. I didn't use it itself for the dead, meaning not that I didn't barter it for shrouds, but I didn't smear it itself. And Rav Ashi says also like this, lonasati dumya deloachalti, that the word lonasati, that I didn't use it for the dead, is similar to the manner in which I didn't eat it. Malalami gufo, just like I didn't use the actual essence, so to have kami gufo. So the Gemara says, fine, we found one case by the Truma where the word by the Pesach, where the word mimenu is extra. But there's an opinion that says the only way we can make Gzeira Shava is if both words are extra. And by Meiser Sheni, you're using all the 3. So there's nothing extra. Vakati movne mitzad echadu. Meaning according to the opinion that says movement from one side is okay, fine. But there's another opinion that says it needs to be movement on both sides. That's a Gemara, by the way, that appears several times in Shas. It appears, it's a common concept. So the Gemara says, Michael Meimer, they would have to say, Rabbi Avo, this idea that Rabbi Avo says that oil of the Meiser Sheni, that if it became Tameh, you can't use it as fuel. That which Rabbi Avoa cited in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, actually, Midrab Nachman Amar Rabbi Avua Nafla. It's not learned out from this Mimenu, it's learned out from Nachman Amar Rabbi Avua, who taught Amar Nachman Amar Rabbi Avua. What do we do with the verse? That I gave my trumosai for you to guard. And what is that referring to? When it says that pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar, it says the Torah is referring to two trumos. It's referring achas truma tahora, achas truma tameya. It's referring to one is truma tahora and one is truma tameya, that you can use those. Meaning to say, the Torah is referring to two trumos, and how could it possibly be the case that you're allowed to use the truma tameya? But you're not allowed to eat it. So therefore, it means that you're allowed to benefit from truma tameya by burning it. And so, since this pasuk tells us that you're only allowed to burn truma tameya, so therefore the word mimenu that says by Marisit Sheni cannot be teaching us that. So therefore, it's free to teach us this Gzeira Shava with the Karban Pesach. So then the Gemara says that anybody who's tamei cannot eat from the truma. Makol tameim or yochel b'truma. Menani mili. What's our source for the idea that somebody who's tamei cannot eat from the truma? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Imishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Kra Ishish Mizera Aaron V'Utzarua Ozav. Rabbi Yochanan, the pasuk says anybody who's from the seed of Aaron and he's tsarua, he's a leper, or he's zav, he's a flow from his body, he cannot eat from the kadashim until adasher yitar, until he goes to become purified. Presumably, how does that mean? He goes into the mikvah. But since the verse says mizera Aaron, it means ezu davar sheshava, on top of lying down on the base, bizarre Aaron. What's something that's equivalent by the seed of Aaron? Avi Omer zu truma. This refers to the truma. The Gemara says ve'ema. Maybe it doesn't refer to the truma that we're saying that you can't eat from the truma, because a woman can eat from the truma, but you can't eat from the kachim. So therefore, it says something like the seed of Aaron that you can't eat. It's obviously the truma that you can't eat in a state of ritual impurity. Maybe it refers to something else that a woman's allowed to eat. What's she allowed to eat? She's allowed to eat the chazah, the shok, the breast and the thigh. The Kohen is given how many metanos? The Kohen is given 24 presents, and from every animal that was killed, the Kohen was given the breast and the thigh. And as a matana of the carbon shlomim, that if there was a carbon shlomim, the Kohen was given the breast and the thigh. And so therefore, the woman would be allowed to eat that. So why don't we say that that's what it's referring to? The Gemara says, yeah, she can eat it, but not once she gets married. Unlike Truma, if she gets married to a non-Kohen, if she was a daughter of a Kohen, she gets married to a non-Kohen, she returns to her father's home and she didn't have children, then she can eat from the Truma, but she cannot eat from the Chaz and the Shok. So the Gemara says, well, Truma Nami ain't but fine, if she became disqualified by marrying somebody she wasn't allowed to, she becomes disqualified and she can't go back to her father's house and eat the Truma. The Gemara says, no, the Chalol is not the seed of Aaron. So that's why it doesn't refer to that. The Gemara says, so therefore, what are we saying? That if you were Tameh, you can't eat from the Truma. The Gemara says, and we learned it out from the verse that says, Adasher Yitar. That until you go to the mikvah and you wait till nightfall, then you can eat from the truma. That's called the law of ha'erev shemesh. It's not enough just to go to the mikvah to eat the truma. You have to wait for the sun to set. No, that's the first mission in the entire Talmud. We might die adasher yitar, and how do we know as the Gemara that it means when it says adasher yitar ad erev shemesh? How do we know it means until the sun sets? Ema maybe it means adamai tzikabar. Maybe it means you have to bring a carbon. We said there are 4 categories of people who have to bring a carbon before they can eat from the sacred food. Who are they? Zav Mitzorah. Zav Mitzorah Yoledis. The Zav is a man who Zav. So, but there are different types of Zav. There's one who has 2 riyos. He doesn't have to bring a carbon. He only saw 2 emissions. But there's the Zav who has 3. He's the one who has to bring the carbon. And so therefore, the Gemara says, Ema Adamai Sikabar. Maybe in this case it says somebody who's tamei can't eat from the truma until he brings a carbon. Or says, no, we're not going to say that. The Talmud Beit Shmuel says we're talking about who can eat it after they go to the mikvah. Who can eat the truma? Zav bal shterios. Zav who saw it twice. He didn't have to bring the carbon yet. Mitzorah muskar. 2 types of mitzorah. We learned this in Moed Katan, Ein Bain, that there's a mitzorah muskar and a mitzorah muchad. Mitzorah muchad is someone who's definitely a leper. Mitzvah Muskar is somebody who we're just not sure if they're a leper. That Mitzvah Muskar doesn't have to bring the carbon because we're not sure if he's a Mitzvah. And so therefore, this pasuk which says that you can eat the truma once you go to the mikvah, that's referring to a Mitzvah Muskar. Because, and Dumya the Tamei Nefesh, because it's similar to somebody who touched a dead body. Ma Tamei Nefesh to Bar Kapara. Just like somebody who touched a dead body, they don't bring a carbon in order to eat from the truma. They can eat it as soon as they immerse in the mikvah, if they were otherwise tamei. Haninami dulav. Excuse me. Just like scratch what I just said. Just like somebody who's tamei nefesh doesn't have to bring a carbon in order to achieve atonement. So too. Haninami dulav v'nei kaparahu. We're talking about people who when they eat truma when they don't require a carbon to bring atonement. Gemara says ve'ema hanimili dulav v'nei kapara. Maybe they don't have to bring a carbon to eat the truma if they anyways don't have to bring a carbon. But if they're a zav zava that they have to bring a carbon of a bar kapora, maybe they can't eat the truma ad maisi kapora. Maybe they would have to bring a carbon. And furthermore, that which we learned in the Mishnah, it stated as follows: Taval va'ala, that once he immerses in the mikvah, ochel b'maiser, he can immediately eat in the maiser sheni. Harav Shemesh, once the sun sets, Ochel b'truma, he can immediately eat from the truma. Avi kapara, once he brings the carbon, Ochel b'kachim, then he can eat from the sacrificial food. Where do we learn all this from? There are 3 verses. It says, he cannot eat from the kachim unless he washes his body in water. Harachatz tahar. Once he goes to mikveh, he can eat. That refers to Meiser Sheni. Then it says, then once the sun sets, he's pure. And then he can eat from the kachim. That refers to the truma. And then it says, and then it says, that once he brings the carbon star, that refers to the mechusar kaparo, who after he brings the carbon can eat from the kachim. So what is this referring to? Kala meiser, kala truma, kala kachim. First category is meiser sheni. The next holiest is truma. The next holiest is the kachim. Gemara says but maybe it's the opposite. Gemara says mistabra truma adifa. No, it's logical that truma is holier than meiser sheni. Shekain machbaz. Because truma has the laws of machbaz. We did this earlier. What machbaz stands for, it's a mnemonic for the stringencies of truma. It's misa, that you get death from heaven, and you have all these categories. So misa, and there's chomesh, and there's pigeon, and zarim. We'd seen it earlier. The Gemara says, "Adrab meiser adima shekain hadas tav." But meiser has its own stringencies of hadas tav, which are you have to do a confession. You have to bring it to Jerusalem. An onaim can't eat it, and you can't use its fuel when you're in a state when it's tamei. So the Gemara says no. The Gemara says no. The fact that you get death for truma is more severe. And Rava says below misa difa namilo matzis amritz. Rava says without death you also wouldn't say that ma'aser sheni is more severe. Amakra nefesh, because it says about truma. It says about Meiser Sheni nefesh, because it says the word nefesh and ezu davar, because it says nefesh or shertiga. But what's something that's shaveh called nefesh? Avi Omer is that Meiser. That refers to the Meiser Sheni because everybody can eat it. Everybody eats the Meiser Sheni. It's your own food you bring to Jerusalem. Mer says vakati animili echa delav bar kapara. But maybe this is only where you don't have to bring a carbon. Maybe they have to bring a carbon. So it says Abaye, Trey Kroik Sivi Bioledes. Okay, 2 psukim Bioledes. Ksiv Ad Melos Yimei Torah. And also, it also says, which means Kiman Shemol Yamei Torah. Once she completes her day, she's pure. And Ksiv Chiperla Koim Tahira. How could it be? Okay, it's that Kala Truma, Kala Kachin. We have to stop here because our chaver that's in person needs to stop now. But I just want to let them go. But we'll continue continuing on the Zoom because they have to go somewhere else. See you guys Sunday morning. Big shkoyach. Big shkoyach to our chevra. Big shkoyach. Big shkoyach to everybody. We have a great yeshiva in person, learning, keeping us strong. All right, shkoyach, guys. Good job. Okay, we continue. Says the Gemara of Epochana. How do we know this? How do we know that's what it's referring to? The Gemara says, Mistabra, Kodesh Chamor, we know that Kachim is more severe. Shekaim Pankas. Kachim has all these unique stringencies. We have pigol and nosar and carbon and meila. So and kares, and it's also for an onen. Gemara says just the opposite. Truma is more severe. She came machbaz. We had said earlier about truma. The Gemara says no. Anach mafishin. By meila, it's stronger. And Rava says, we wouldn't say this even if it wasn't stronger. So the and if it was written by Kachim, it would say so we see from here that the verse is referring to it's not talking about Mechutz Kippurim, it's talking about Truma. Okay, so let us stop here. If anyone has any questions, I will address them. I know this is a very complicated, but tomorrow. Hold on, let me just stop the recording. Tomorrow's daf.